everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. In this video, I want to respond to a commenter. I'm going to keep them anonymous just because I don't want them to think that this response is meant to be offensive or an attack or anything like that. I appreciated their comment, so if you're watching this, I thank you for your comment. And I don't think that you would take this offensively, but I'm still just I'm going to play it safe. And the point was brought up. This was on the video the most recent video I did on the Antichrist and false messiahs. And I basically said that, and I still maintain this position, that there's not one singular person that's going to be the Antichrist before the second coming. I don't believe that. And it's based on the quote from Neil L. Andersen. We're going to read that again in just a minute here. But the person said, well, you have to keep in mind that in the book of Revelation, right, we know from the Book of Mormon that John was given the revelation for the book of Revelation, and Nephi easily could have written it down, but he was forbidden to do that it was saved just for John. And so it could be that current day prophets and apostles, they don't really expand too much on the book of Revelation. And so when it comes to stuff like the Antichrist, like, yeah, you're not going to see that in General Conference maybe because of that. Which I don't know, because I think that they do talk about things from the book of Revelation. I hear that they reference it, so I'm not sure I'm on board with that. But basically, toward the end, it was like, so, I know that you like to do things about the Jewish feast days. When's the last time that you heard the general authorities talk about the Jewish feast days? Because that's one of your beliefs, is that they are important to the church. And then I thought, you know what, you're right. But I'm pretty sure that they have brought it up in General Conference, and I would be curious to know when the last time was that any of them referenced the Jewish feast days. So that's what this is about right here, okay? I'm going to show you. Now, first, I want to do a review of this quote from Neil L. Andersen. This is from his talk, Trial of Your Faith. He says, "There is an important principle that governs the doctrine of the church. The doctrine is taught by all 15 members of the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12. It is not hidden in an obscure paragraph of one talk. True principles are taught frequently and by many. Our doctrine is not difficult to find." And that's the problem that I have with the Antichrist idea, is because it is difficult to find. When you read the scriptures, whether it be in Daniel, because there's people that look at the book of Daniel and say, oh, see, it's talking about an Antichrist, and then they match it up with the book of Revelation and certain things that are talked about in there and say, oh, see, this is a one person that's going to be the Antichrist. And that's not really an easy conclusion to come to, because a lot of the scriptures that surround the Antichrist are symbolic in nature. They're talking about horns, right? Specifically in the book of Daniel, we're talking about the short, stout horn. So it's not like it's talking about, it's being like very clear about who that is or what it means. And so I've done videos on that, and so it's not easy to find, and it's not repeated. When is the last time that you've heard any of the 12 apostles or the First Presidency talk about the prophecy of a singular Antichrist in the last days? And I challenge you to find that. In fact, I did a search for that too. So I'm going to show you what I came up with, okay? So from 1942 until present, using the Scripture Citation Index, this is what I found. The Feast of Weeks, which is also known as Pentecost, which is also known as Shavuot, that came up 83 times. Which actually kind of surprised me, because I would have thought that Passover would have come up more, because that's the one that we, they're all important, but Passover is the one that's connected with the Atonement, right? So I would have thought that would have showed up more, but it didn't. Passover / Pesach came up 73 times. First fruits, or the Feast of First Fruits, and whenever they're talking about first fruits, it's a direct connection to the Feast of First Fruits. That's where that term comes from, right? It's the day after the first Sabbath during the Passover week, where they literally offer up their first fruits of the harvest and their best. And that's what Christ represented. So that's where we get the phrase first fruits. And that's brought up 30 times. The Feast of Tabernacles, or otherwise known as Sukkot, that's been brought up 4 times. The Day of Atonement, which is also known as Yom Kippur, 4 times. And then the Feast of Unleavened Bread, 4 times. Okay? Now, this is the last time that these were brought up. In 2021, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Also in 2021, Passover / Pesach. In 2020, Feast of First Fruits. In 2018, the Feast of Weeks, otherwise known as Pentecost and Shavuot. In 2004, the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. And in 1999, the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur. Okay, and then I did a further search because this right here, these first 2, data sets are based on General Conference talks. I wanted to also see if this came up in the Journal of Discourses and also Scriptural Teachings of the Prophet Joseph Smith, which is also part of the Scripture Citation Index. So very similar to up here, and surprisingly, to me, Pentecost comes up 53 times and is in the number 1 spot. After that is Passover, or Pesach, 7 times. Feast of First Fruits, 3 times. Feast of Tabernacles, 4 times. And then Feast of Unleavened Bread, 1 time. Okay. Now, interestingly, between both of these sets, the modern day and then the earlier day sets, the Feast of Trumpets, otherwise known as Rosh Hashanah, is not brought up, but all the other ones are. So I don't know. I find that interesting. Now, Antichrist with a hyphen, as well as Antichrist without a hyphen, added together, come up 47 times. And I was able to check the context because, okay, let me just show you. When you come over here to the Scripture Citation Index, where do I got it? Okay, let's do a search just so I can show you. So let's do anti-Christ. Sorry, actually I need to put that in quotes. And then let's just do general conferences so there's not a billion. Okay, so you can see here the result. I don't know if I can I zoom in? Okay, yeah, you can see here, it shows you kind of like the couple sentences that are around the search term. So here you have it right here in D. Todd Christofferson's 2021 talk, Antichrist. And you can see just quickly, without going to the talk itself, basically the context by the surrounding sentences around the search term. So I went through those, and in no case is it talking about a singular Antichrist of the last days. Usually, most often they're referring to the Antichrists of the Book of Mormon, like Korihor or Nahor. And we know that there's many Antichrists, right? In fact, up here, it says, the way of the world, as you know, is Antichrist, or anything but Christ. So that's like one definition of Antichrist. And so, but anyway, out of all these references, they're pretty much always talking about the Book of Mormon, Antichrists, or like D. Todd Christofferson right here, they're talking about just the general concept of Antichrist in the last days, which is many people, and I think it's also, they seem to be talking about general ideas, philosophies, maybe organizations that have turned their back on God and they're like actively against Christ. But under none of these do you find the idea or talk of a prophecy of a final Antichrist. It just isn't there. The only place that you get that idea is when you read the book of Revelation and the book of John, and you try and interpret those symbols as though it's easy to do that. And I can't find anywhere where anyone in the church has interpreted those symbols as a person, like a single final boss of, like on a video game, the final boss. No one has interpreted it that way. Nobody. Now, I'll tell you who does like to interpret it that way. The evangelicals, especially. They're like really, really big for some reason on the Antichrist. I don't hear it so much with Catholics. I listen to many different channels. Not so much nowadays. Now that I'm doing my own channel, it's hard for me to like spend too much time on YouTube watching other people's stuff. But I used to listen to Catholic channels and evangelical channels and so on and so forth. And the ones that are really big on it are the evangelicals. They're always talking about it. And I think a lot of them are really good people. I think that they're sincere, and they're doing the best with what they have. They're doing the best with what they have. But again, they don't have the benefit of modern revelation. They don't have the benefit of a prophet, a first presidency, a quorum of the 12 apostles, a quorum of the 70. They don't have any additional scripture like what we have outside of the New and Old Testament. They don't have the Book of Mormon. They don't have the Pearl of Great Price. So their understanding of things, even though there's a lot that you can find in the Bible, it's limited. There's so much that they don't have that's only found here in our church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So what I think happens, this is my theory, is that this idea has been around for so long and perpetuated mostly by evangelicals that it shows up in movies, in books, in TV shows. And then if you're trying to research the last days, a lot of people will go to their resources because they do have good stuff. Like, I just think that we need to be super careful. They do. I feel like they do interpret a lot of things very correctly, and they have very good insights. They really do study the Bible, But the problem is the difference between us. They're going to have different interpretations than we do. Again, like that one example in Revelation 12. They don't have the Joseph Smith translation. So where they read 1,260 days, the Joseph Smith translation says years. And then on top of that, they don't have our interpretation of the scriptures. We've interpreted, they don't have a concept, like I've said before, they don't have a concept of the great apostasy. In their mind, that time that we call the great apostasy, they call the church age. That's quite the contrast. In their mind, everything's basically been okay since the times of Christ. And of course, they realized that there was the Reformation, and that was a good thing. And you've had all these different groups. But their worldview compared to ours when it comes to like the last days and interpretations of scriptures that have to do with the last days is very different. It's very different. We don't read the book or the chapter 12 of Revelation the same way at all. They don't even realize that the dragon in knocking down a third of the host of heaven with his tail, or the stars of heaven. I can't remember how it's worded. They think that that's something that's going to happen, not realizing that that's referring to the pre-existence and Satan and drawing a third of the host of heaven with him. Right? So we have incredibly different interpretations of some things. There's other things where we do agree, right? There is common ground, but there's also a lot of differences, and the differences are pretty big, right? And I think that this is a lot of the times the reason why they don't accept us as Christians, because our doctrine on certain things is so unique and so specific, right? So I really do feel that the idea of Antichrist, I guess I'd have to do a research into it, but I think that it's mostly perpetuated by evangelicals, mostly, although I'm sure maybe you could find Baptists or Methodists or other people that maybe they think the same thing. I don't know. But what I can tell you for sure, 100% for sure, is that in all the general conferences between 1942 to present, there has not been any mention whatsoever of a prophecy of an Antichrist in the last days, other than the general idea of Antichrists, plural, and Antichrist as a philosophy of man, right? You cannot find it. You cannot find it in General Conference. You cannot find it in church materials anywhere. It doesn't matter if you look at the Liahona. It doesn't matter if you look at student manuals. It doesn't matter if you look at Sunday school manuals or any church publication of any sort. You know, if you know of one, let me know, and I'll gladly put it on here. But I'm certain that it doesn't exist. Why? Because I've been in the church my entire life, and I've always been interested in these things. I'm very familiar with what is out there, right? Not saying that I know it all perfectly. I don't. But if this did exist, this idea, if it officially existed within the church, I'm pretty sure I would have come across it. It would have popped up somewhere. I would have come across it in seminary. I would have come across it in general conference. I would have come across it in institute, in college. But it's nowhere to be found, as far as I know. If you know where it is, show it to me. Don't quote a scripture to me and say, well, what about, the ceasing of the sacrifice and oblation in the middle of the week? No, do not use those scriptures, because there is no... Okay. Because that all depends on interpretation. And most of the time, when people quote those scriptures to me, they are assuming that they have the correct interpretation, not being able to show me where the church views that interpretation as valid. Okay? So that's my thoughts on it. I am more sure, I am more sure that the 10 lost tribes are going to come from outer space than I am about a singular Antichrist in the last days. In fact, I came across, interestingly, in one of the student manuals a quote from Joseph Fielding Smith talking about the 10 lost tribes that does support the idea that they're still a group separate from the world. I still hold my view, but at least with the 10 lost tribes, it has more credibility than the Antichrist idea. I don't think that there's enough for me to be able to say, oh yes, there's 10 lost tribes. I really think that the chances are very small. But I'll do that video. I'll show you what I'm talking about, because I'm not going to hide anything. If I find something that says that I'm wrong, I'm going to bring it up and put it on the channel, because I am looking for truth. And I know that that's what you're doing too. You're looking for truth. We're all looking for truth. And so if something conflicts with a belief that I had before, I'm not going to hold on to that belief, because I'm not a rigid person like that. So I'm going to show you. In fact, maybe one of these days I'll do like a grand master video putting together all the different evidences for the 10 lost tribes for everybody's consideration. Okay? I'm not afraid to go there. And again, I haven't completely ruled that idea out. Anyway, okay, now I'm just rambling. So, okay, so let me know what you think about this. Did you have any thoughts coming to mind as I was going through this? What's your opinion? Just put it in the comments below. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it. Make sure to share this with anyone that would find this useful or helpful, and I'll talk to you guys later.